Hi guys, today I want to dive into something that has been on my mind for a while, Hollow Knight, and since the sequel is just around the corner, I think it's time to share my thoughts a bit about this game, since it's one of the highest praised indie titles out there, and honestly I think it really deserves. It's really remarkable what two people at Team Cherry managed to achieve by creating this massive atmospheric world with deep lore. It's been also very inspiring for many indie devs as well. But no game is perfect, and Hollow Knight definitely has its flaws. I've played this game a few times now, and while I love it overall, there are some things that just bug me out, pun intended. So in this video I'm going to break down what I think are the main issues with the game, and hopefully the sequel could fix them. First up, the snail-like pacing in the early hours. Now this is a rather common complaint I've seen floating around, and for good reasons. The game starts off so damn slow. Like you have a tiny simple nail and that's pretty much it. No fancy moves, no upgrades, just slogging along through the forgotten crossroads, slashing mostly basic enemies. I actually quit the game a couple times early on because it felt like not much was happening. I would pick it back later knowing that it gets way better, but the initial slog was still an issue for me. Now don't get me wrong, a slow start isn't inherently bad. Some might argue it's great because it lets you soak in the atmosphere, the melancholic music, the hand-drawn art, the sense of mystery it conveys. And I kind of understand that, but here's the thing, you could still convey all those things and still have some basic upgrades as well much early on in the game. Actions like dash, wall jumping or double jump, despite being quite basic, they do elevate the combat and exploration quite a lot. I remember getting the dash after a few hours of back and forth, and I was like, finally I'm getting something out of this game and progressing. And the thing is, even after I got all those upgrades I mentioned, I was still taking my time and exploring new areas, poking around every corner. So yes, speeding up that early progression would have hooked the players without changing the world's charm and pacing that much, so hopefully Silksong ramps things up much quicker. Alright, moving on to point number 2, those awful boss runbacks. If you played any Souls-inspired game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's rather tedious and annoying, and honestly it kills the momentum. Take for example the Soul Master fight. That damn bench is quite far away, and on top of that the Soul Master's ghost or whatever that shit is keeps spawning in narrow hallways. Sure, you can make the case it's challenging, but honestly I really don't find this type of challenge enjoyable. I've seen this complaint pop up in tons of Souls-like games, so yeah, Hollow Knight isn't immune to this criticism. And the solution is quite simple, maybe add more benches closer to bosses, or some shortcuts you can unlock after a few attempts. That would make retries less punishing, and more about mastering the fight itself without wasting my time backtracking every single time. Point 3 runbacks to gather your lost souls, or Geo in this case. This mechanic is everywhere in Souls-like now, and back then when Hollow Knight dropped in 2017, it was still kind of fresh. But honestly these days it feels way too overused and quite insufferable. So you die, you drop your Geo where you fell, and you have to go back to grab it from your shade before dying again, and losing it forever. What annoys me the most about Hollow Knight version is when you die in a new area you haven't mapped yet, the map doesn't show where the shade is, so you'll end up kind of blindly wandering through maze-like areas, which can be very frustrating. I can't tell how many times I got lost, died again, and then just poof, goodbye Geo. Now since the game was early on in the Souls-like boom, I can be a bit more charitable, but man, a simple map marker where your shade is would have been a lifesaver. Number 4, not enough shops, and way too much backtracking because of it. Again, Hollow Knight draws influence from Souls games with its checkpoint system, in this case benches instead of bonfires. You sit on a bench to respawn enemies, heal, save progress, but unlike Souls games where bonfires let you level up right there, benches won't do that. You have to move your butt all the way to a shop to spend your Geo on charms, upgrades and other things. And the thing is, shops are very rare. There's Sly in Dirtmouth, a few scattered vendors like the ones in Dirtmouth again. There's also Salumbra or the Leg Eater guy, but that's kind of it for such a huge map. Fast travel doesn't help much either, since there's only one station per zone, so you're constantly backtracking with enemies respawning. It's just such a grind. I lost so much Geo after a tough boss fight because I would die on my way to a shop. Now the solution to this is quite simple. Add more shops across the map, maybe tied to benches or in more key areas. Now I understand backtracking is a Metroidvania staple, but I think Hollow Knight takes things way too far. It felt like padding and wasting my time instead of adding value. Let's hope Silksong spreads out those vendors better. And the final point, environmental design choices. I have a few issues here, starting with the color palette. It's a bit too limited, which makes areas blend together way more than they should. For example, Forgotten Crossroad is mostly blue and grey. Green Path, well, green. City of Tears, more blue. Crystal Peak gets a bit more purple, but overall there's not much pop or use of complementary colors to make things stand out. Now there are some exceptions, like the Hive area for example, among a few other places. Now don't get me wrong, this fits the game's moody, desolated vibes, sure, but after a few hours of play, it starts feeling samey and monotonous. On top of that, most areas don't have unique mechanics for players to interact with. It's a lot of the same platforming, jumping and nail slashing, with occasional spikes and acid pools. Fungal Waste stands out a bit more with bouncy mushrooms, and Path of Pain has those insane saw blades challenges. But that's more like the exception. The game would greatly benefit from more variety, like area-specific puzzles, or more traversal tools. But the good news from what I've seen from Silksong clips, it looks like Team Cherry stepping up a bit. There are new tools and challenges, like zipping around or trapped-filled platforms, and I really hope there's more, because it could fix a lot of the visual and gameplay monotony the game offers after a while. So yeah, that's my rundown of Hollow Knight's main problems. Now, like I said in the beginning, I still believe it's a really good game, and definitely among the best Indie Sphere has to offer. So yeah, that's about it, feel free to agree or disagree, and see you next time, bye bye.